I'll kick us off then on ISAs, and it's bad news for friend of the show, ISA investor. At least it could be bad news for friend of the show, ISA investor. A think tank called the Resolution Foundation has made a proposal that's been getting a lot of coverage on YouTube and on Twitter and on Discord. And I was looking at this earlier today, and I thought perhaps the coverage I'd seen had been a little bit patchy, so as usual I felt the need to start talking about it. But here's what the Resolution Foundation have said. To be clear, they're not the government. They don't have any obvious influence over the government. Their job is to think of things, propose things, make their case for those things, and then see what politicians think of them from whichever party. So the Resolution Foundation are interested in this thing called Help to Save, and that's not very popular with YouTubers in the sense they don't talk about it very much, probably because most of them have never heard of it. The reason for that is you only qualify for the scheme called Help to Save if you are earning working tax credits or on universal credit or something along those lines. So that's not typically the position of most people who are in a position to be making or watching with any interest investment videos or personal finance videos or stocks and stock market videos or anything like that. So you don't hear too much about this, but Help to Save basically is there to encourage lower earners and probably the lowest earners in the UK to try and save. And what happens is they open an account and they can pay in up to £50 a month if they are able. And for every pound they pay in, they get 50p from the government as a boost. That comes after, I think, the second year and after the fourth year. After the fourth year, the account closes into a different current account. That's roughly the shape of this. And the Resolution Foundation picked up that this is quite poorly taken up. There's high satisfaction rates with it, but very low take-up amongst the eligible people. And they think this would like to be something that they use more effectively. So what they want to do is expand this by auto-enrolling people so they don't have to go and figure out how to sign up for it, and double the monthly allowance to £100. That's expensive then, so it means more government money gets used for what we might loosely call bonuses on this. And the way they plan to pay for that is by adjusting the tax-free allowances on ISAs, or the way they propose that government should pay for that is by adjusting the tax-free ISA allowance. So rather than what we get at the moment, which is £20,000 allowance per year on deposits, they propose to make it, the number I'm hearing at is capped at £100,000 per annum. I don't know, it's 100,000, sorry, in total forever, not per annum. I don't know whether that means your balance isn't allowed to go over that, or whether that's the maximum deposit you're allowed. I assume it's deposits, because those of us who have them in stocks and shares ISAs might be, if we put in 100,000, we might be over on the second day and under on the third day and back up again on the fourth day and so on, and that would be basically impossible to manage. But they estimate this would raise around £1 billion a year. Why do they want to do this? Well, mostly because they say it's the rich that benefit from ISAs, and by that they mean the top 10% rich. So they think sort of £3 in every 10 that goes into an ISA comes from the top 10%, and about 41% of the tax revenue that is quote-unquote lost by having things in protected wrappers like ISAs comes from that top 10% again. Why 100,000 as a maximum? I have absolutely no idea. I didn't read the report carefully enough to tell you that. Whether they think there's any idea that people might just leave the country and whether they think this would work in any interesting fashion, I don't know. But that's the shape of the proposal. And what I've been hearing quite a lot is a £100,000 cap on ISAs, and not much about the kind of background of why. And I thought that was kind of interesting, so I thought I would mention it here. What do you think? Paul's making notes, so Steve, go first.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing I thought when I saw it was that it just seems like it's a load of rubbish. It's basically trying to push a scheme that evidently nobody wants to use. Maybe it's been badly publicised, we could argue that, but and this is the other thing that really irritates you, is that the Resolution Foundation says on their website that they're here to help lower income and middle income families, so lower and middle class people, to get more out of the UK economy, and quite how sort of taking away one of the vehicles, the only vehicles we have really to make the middle and lower class more wealthy in a sort of tax advantaged way is kind of tricky for me, and the money that you would save in that you would generate in capping ISAs and starting to tax people again is just more headache for the tax office to chase down these taxes and claim it. So it's not a net benefit in any way, shape or form. And the issue we've really got in Britain is that we've got a lot of people who have slipped onto the sort of poverty line, and your thoughts and feelings on that probably depend on how you lean politically and whether you believe we should help people or shouldn't help people, small state big state kind of thing. But that's not going to be helped by pumping more money into Help to Save. These people, no matter which way you look at it, don't have the money to put into these schemes. So widening the scheme to give them a better bonus doesn't help them. And there are a number of people out there who think there are various ways to solve this. One of the things Rutger Bregman thinks is to just give people money, because when people have more money, they have less strain on their mind, because as you'll know, if anybody who's ever been in any kind of debt or anything like that, the financial strain of thinking about it really takes away a lot of your brain power. One of the ways you can ease that is by giving people more money. They have less stress on the brain, they make better decisions. But it's that really, isn't it? I think that's the problem I've got with it. It just feels like a crap idea. Basically, somebody in the Daily Mail said, why don't you guys come up with something really stupid and we'll pass it off as if the Tories are going to do it, which is how these headlines were worded. It fooled a lot of people into thinking that, and it still is fooling people into thinking that.
Big picture of Jeremy Hunt, right? That's all I've seen.
Yeah, and it's fooling people into thinking that this is something Jeremy Hunt has done. He's been urged to do it, but he's been urged to do it by some dudes who are on the severe left of our sort of political debate at the moment, and they've got almost no chance of getting this through, I don't think. So go on, Paul, I'll pass the mic over.
So before he said I was taking notes, you've covered quite a bit of my first initial thoughts. This is the first time I've ever heard that I've seen the headline. I just ignored it because it just kind of went, until it happens, I don't care. I don't care about political. I wrote down net benefit, obviously, was the thing that you were saying there about how it's probably going to cost a lot more to track down these taxes rather than what we get. But I also had does 20k of tax benefit per person in the UK really benefit the world, taking that off the middle class, rather, because you're saying it's the top 10%. The top 10%, it is capped, right? So it's one of the few tax benefits that they actually have capped, that they can say, okay, that person has, that household has 40k in benefit, tax-free benefit. That's what we know we're going to have. So the idea of this, and again, the same thing, some of what you were saying there, is that it shows out how out of touch with the psychology of saving money these people really are. This is I've written down here, someone arbitrarily paid to do a stupid job and try and fix a problem which either doesn't exist, or they've sat there, they've looked at two budgets and gone, oh, if we take away from that budget, we can raise this budget, and then we can sell it as we're helping poor people. But the thing is the reason why poor people are not saving because they don't have access to £50 a month or £100 a month. It's not that. It's the fact that if you're on the bottom line on benefits, on tax credits these days in the UK, you are not thinking about saving. You are thinking about putting food in your children's mouth. There's people on, they're talking about these food banks and things like that. I don't see much of it personally, but they're saying more and more people are going to food banks. So people are not going to have £50 a month. So that means raising the threshold for it isn't going to change it. And what it is some person who is quite financially astute and quite good with their benefits, and they say, okay, the reason why people aren't saving is because £50 a month isn't going to get them out of poverty. And no, it's unlikely to get them out of poverty. The compounding there isn't there, but it's also 100 isn't either. So there's something wrong there, that they think that people aren't taking it up because the cap isn't big enough. It's absolutely stupid, and something's wrong there. But what we're missing here is education, right? Education is people who are on the bottom line, and statistically, people who are on that bottom line with either a low-paid job or no job at all, they're not necessarily, and I feel quite bad saying something like this, but they're not necessarily going to have the education or the financial wherewithal to start compounding, to start building for their future and things, and that's the problem. That's where it should be coming in. We should be having education in this rather than taking from the middle class to pay for the poor, and creating more of a middle class squeeze. It just doesn't work. It's stupid. You're right. Sorry.
I think you're right in when you say it's stupid. It's not that these people don't have the incentive to save money. It's that they just don't have the ability. So from that point off, the plan is really, really flawed. But the other thing is that saying that I haven't seen any data. There isn't an awful lot of data in that report that actually supports the claim that these millionaires are, these big millionaires in Britain, which they think are taking us for a ride, are actually using an ISA. And the reason for it is if you've got £500 million in the bank, you ain't shoveling 20 grand a year into an ISA.
Exactly.
It's absolutely no point. Like, you could fart 20 grand on a car with that kind of money. So there's no incentive that is happening. Look, if you want to raise tax to pay for help to save, then go after non-dom status. It'll raise a hell of a lot more money, and it's probably a lot more politically. I think it's a lot more politically palatable tax to apply on people. But the thing is about ISAs is that, and it's worth it, is that this has already been taxed. It's pre-taxed as part of your income or whatever before it goes into an ISA. And when it comes out again, you're not taxed on it, but you're going to be taxed on the spending of it. So it is really a double taxed account. You can't then keep piling pressure on people. You're just going to end up with a squeezed middle and a poorer working class. That just doesn't work. What we need to do is cut down wealth inequality in the UK. I think that's pretty much a universal policy. The rich have got too rich and the poor have got too poor. We need to narrow that gap a little bit. But this isn't going to do it. This is going to make it worse.
Socialist. No, I totally agree. I think ultimately, though, I think this is something so what bring this into perspective, right? And I'm sure someone else has already said this, but there's 1,000 of these think tank things that come out every single week, and they don't make the headlines. This one's just made the headline. It's unlikely to see the light of day. This is just some. This is the civil service equivalent of a social media TikToker who's telling us about their day. They're sitting there doing fuck all in their job, and they're trying to justify their existence, and they've decided to come up with this. This is what I would be making if I was in that job. So I think that goes to say a lot, right? I think I don't think this is going to see the light of day, and I think it's probably made some great YouTube videos for people and got a lot of views, but it's absolutely pointless. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I feel broadly the same way. I see ISAs more as a useful vehicle for helping people to move upwards rather than a way of the top, however many percent, enforcing their status at the top. I'm very wary about being instructed to check my privilege again on this, and I'm very conscious about how it kind of looks me handing down, as I mentioned, right, the people who use help to save schemes or are eligible for help to save schemes are almost certainly not watching this video. And I'm not about to try and hand down advice to them or anything like that. But I'm in favour of anything that helps that help to save scheme. I quite like the sound of it for what it's worth. I am doubtful that trying to get it out of ISAs is the way to go, especially if, as the Resolution Foundation say, they want to try and redistribute it from the top to the lower end of the income scale. I think what will happen is you'll move it out in the middle, and I think that for two reasons. One that we've talked about a little bit, which is that I doubt very much that ISAs are the vehicle that people with 500 million are using to hide themselves from tax, although it's possible there's significant amounts in there. I haven't done any research into that, so I'll take their word for it. The other is that I am concerned that the rich will just leave. I mean, not that he counts as the top 10% in society necessarily, at least not on a net worth basis. But Boss Hog was saying in his video that he was joking that he would just leave if someone decided to take away his ISA allowance or limit his ISA allowance in that way. I don't think that would. I mean, I don't think I'd be able to convince anybody that I live with to come and leave with me in this situation. But honestly, I wouldn't blame anyone who thought they would in this situation if they thought, look, my plan was to try and build an ISA, use that to retire and support my self via kind of tax-free savings. That's now basically impossible, capped at 100,000. I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere that has lower tax rates. I wouldn't blame anybody at all who thought that way. I think I'm going to be unable to convince anyone to do it. But do either of you think you'd have any more joy than me?
It depends what is it going to be a cap on? If it's a cap on, let's say, the deposits, which I'm assuming it is, which means the capital appreciation from it could go quite far, right? Which is, take the Charlie Munger, the first 100,000 is the hardest, and I've done a lot of my compound interest calculations based on dumping £100,000 in, and that would be what we call my coast fire. So I wouldn't ever need to put any more in theory. But so I would absolutely be in. I'd be taking advantage of as much tax-free money as I possibly could. But it certainly makes life a little bit harder, and it makes more money if I can contribute more over a longer period of time. So maybe if they did, I mean, Steve D would fill it straight away. If they had 100 grand cap with no yearly limit, you just bung in 100 grand and never think about it ever again, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't have that much liquid cash hanging around. I think you think you've mistaken me with Scrooge McDuck. But but broadly, I agree, and I think I mean, it was only this. I was telling Boss Hog that to have a look at Portugal, and that was something that was basically, this is an opportunity post Brexit now, when we start to lose some of our key industries, and we've seen our financial epicenter has become less of a thing. We're seeing a lot of move over to Frankfurt and what have you, and Paris is now the biggest stock exchange in the Europe area. So we will start to see some brain drain as these people, obviously even things like visas expire and they go home. And this is a really good opportunity, if this was to come in, for all of the countries around them to just offer some favourable tax positions. And Portugal is doing that at the moment. They've got huge brain drain over the last sort of 10 years. And one of the things they're doing is, I think it's zero income tax for 10 years if you come over. So that is a hell of, I think, zero capital gains as well for a set period. It might be capital gains for 10, it might be income tax for 5. Whatever it is, anyway, they're really trying hard to get their people home and to bring some people with them. So it's a bad policy for broader UK. Even if you think there's a net benefit in helping Help to Save, the actual wider picture is not so good.